Welcome to Talent Takeover
Unfiltered.
When it comes to working hard and keeping it real, we know our shit. Self-care, happiness, inner peace, and time. I'm Brianna Rooney, and this is Taylor Bradley.
Hey, y'all.
And we have thrived in chaos and turned it into an art form. So Taylor, what are we doing here today?
We're here to give you a raw, under-the-hood view of all things recruiting and finally give credit where credit is due to a long underrated industry that's full of quote-unquote experts.
All right. Well, then let's take this show to the road. Hello. Welcome to Talent Takeover Unfiltered. What's going on? Taylor Bradley, what's going on?
What's up?
I don't know why I got so broski, which is my...
You did. I had to match your energy.
It's too funny. Okay, so I'm super excited about this particular subject because it came from our last one, which was the how to be an assertive recruiter. So what we're going to talk about today is how to give candidates constructive criticism in order to pass all of the interviews. I love this. I've got some battle stories here, and I like that we are unfiltered because this is that moment.
All the tea.
This is that moment.
Okay, so let's just get ready to start with some of your battle stories.
Well, first, let's not forget your broke to boss tip. You're going to just, poof, give them.
Yeah. Oh, well, our listeners already know that. By the end of this, I'm going to hit them with a broke to boss tip, but they know they want to hear these ratchet stories that you had.
Ratchet. Oh my God. That's one of the worst words.
You can edit that out and put a different one if there needs to be a different word. But the shit show stories. Let's hear it.
Yeah. Okay. So I think communication is a biggie, right?
Yeah.
And so back in the day, they didn't say communication skills. They just said, hey, I don't like this person has too thick of an accent, or it's like, whoa. There's all sorts of illegal going on here. That is communication. Okay.
Oh my God.
So that first and foremost, that might go, we're in trouble. That might go with the hiring manager issue. But it's like, how do you call up somebody and say, your accent's really thick and the hiring manager is having a hard time understanding you. They actually wanted us verbatim to tell that candidate that.
So, give us all the stories. So, okay. What did you do? Because I have so many questions about what did you do? How did you handle this? What did you say to the hiring manager? Yeah, so get into all of it.
Yeah, so my thing is when it gets really difficult like that and it's absolutely an illegal thing to say to somebody, first and foremost, it's rude. There's so many reasons why that's not okay. So it comes down to communication. So what I would just say would be hey, do me a favor. We had a couple of complaints, and I never say that it was from them because I think that people get too much in their head. I think there's too much anxiety going on in interviews. I said, hey, last week we had a candidate. They were in kind of a noisy place. The hiring manager had a hard time understanding them, or they spoke a little too fast. So it's really important to slow down, enunciate, and make sure that you guys are on the same page because I know that the hiring manager really appreciates that.
Got it. Okay.
That's how I had to roll with that.
I was writing down some questions. So, do you think giving feedback on an accent is different than giving feedback to a candidate? Then is different than giving feedback to somebody for maybe talking too fast? You need to slow down when you're talking. I know it's nerves are going, but do you think the two differ?
I do.
I do too.
Yeah. I think it's two completely separate things. I talk very, very fast. I have been told to slow down, and I've noticed myself because I am aware of that I do it. And so I remember being on the phone with someone, and he was like, whoa, hey, fellow recruiter, and I was really thrown back. I was like, hey, what's up? He was like, I can tell you've been doing this for a long time. You talk really fast. I'm like, oh, well, thank you, and I will also slow down.
Yeah. I've always gotten that I talk really fast too, and so sometimes I'll have to be and start over and talk. our listeners are sitting here you bitches both talk but I think it's completely different to give the feedback to somebody that your accent's too thick, and then the feedback you need to slow down talking. So with regards to hiring managers and the constructive criticism that I would be willing to give to candidates, 1,000%, you need to slow down when you're speaking, or even if they're talking too slow or too soft. Because I was actually around somebody this past weekend for dinner, and we were just at one of those long dining tables. It was a group of couples, and the guy directly across from me is trying to talk to me, and we're in a restaurant, but it's 5 o'clock dinner, right? Senior citizen time.
Did you get a discount for that?
It's not. We did not. But it's not popping off in there is my point.
Right,
like
right,
it's not
yeah.
super loud. And he just talks so slow that I was like, huh? And he's directly across from me at a table. And I was like, oh my God, this is painful, because I kept having to ask him like, sorry, I couldn't hear you. Could you say that again? And no one wants to have to be that person.
Mm-hmm.
So just for people that talk soft, if on the receiving end of it, the rest of us, nobody wants to have to, can you talk a little bit louder? It just also feels uncomfortable for us too. And I will say that's not typically the norm. It's most people talk too fast in interviews, but talking with an accent, that's not something that I would be willing to go. And I really just feel like, but I also understand if there's just such a breakdown of communication between the person that is going to be managing this person directly, and they just on both sides feel like they can't understand each other, what do you do there?
Yeah. So as a recruiter too, it's like as you're on the phone with someone who doesn't have the best communication skills, I also think that you have to pass that forward and to the hiring manager as well. I'd be like, hey, look, on paper, this person's great. I had some struggles, in order, like as we're speaking, in order to have like our communication skills are a little bit different. But I think there can still really be a great fit for you. Yeah, but trust me, it is hard because you want to just get to it and say what you need to say, but not okay. That's where the whole biases come creeping in. Which is like its own separate.
Okay, so let's get into this. And it's not related to candidates, same but different. But what about working with clients where there is a language barrier, and there's a language barrier between your recruiter and the client, and therefore, is inevitable there's going to be one with anybody that they interview, and what impacts will that have on the interview process? So what do you do there?
Yeah. So it's like the elephant in the room, and no one wants to say anything because it's like, what do you mean? Like, how do you change that? Right.
Yeah.
So what I try to do is then go like, okay, how can we communicate? Is our communication better via email?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Is our communication better via like voice messages? So I basically I will tell the recruiter, hey, let's figure out how this person communicates well, how we can really come together. And then that's what we're going to do is be like, hey, you know what? I found that we can communicate better via email. So let's just switch to email, and by all means, we can hop on the phone. Or, hey, you know what? I feel like I need to do video with you as opposed to just being on the phone. I think that we can be more in the present together. I think there's all sorts of different ways you can say it without being like, I cannot understand you.
Okay. So for me, having an approach, and I definitely want to get your thoughts on this, with a client that either am going to have a conversation with, or we could say I've had a conversation with, that there's really a struggle to understand this individual. And then also the candidates are struggling to understand them. So they would be working with him directly and reporting to him, and obviously have some concerns with that, with not being able to directly really communicate with the person that they'd work for. And so my recommendation to this hiring manager is going to be, I have to give you this feedback, but also, can we bring somebody else in the interview? So not operating so much as a panel, I would want that to be clear that it's different, but more to help you drive your points home, because I definitely feel like there's no way a candidate is going to sign up to work for somebody that they can't understand, that will directly manage them. Mm-hmm. Like if you and I couldn't communicate whenever you first interviewed me and we were first talking about this role, there's no way that I would have accepted it, because I just feel like you're on two different planets. If you can't communicate with each other, it's never going to work. And so that's where it's like, sometimes you do have to say that. Sometimes you do have to give that feedback. And with regards to hiring managers, with candidates, I don't know that there's anything a candidate can do if that's the way that they speak. But with a hiring manager, maybe bringing somebody else in that could help out with driving the point home. And then also, I feel like we can say to hiring managers, it's going to be real struggle for Joe, you and Sally to communicate because she's really struggling to understand. So could she have a dotted line to James to report to? Like, there's got to be something. But I feel like with hiring managers, I'm more inclined to give that feedback with regards to their communication and accents than I am to candidates. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that is true, because lots of times you'll have other areas of opportunity internally. As an external mindset, what we would do is we would match them up. So if someone's from somewhere in particular, we would go find candidates that were from that particular place. That's how we would go about that. The issue there is there's not going to be a lot of diversity, but there's all sorts of other diversity, that you could have in an organization.
Yeah. But what if they're all going to report to the same guy? So you got to find like accounting and finance, you got to find marketing, you got to find all these different people that, wow.
Yeah.
So you just niche down your search even that much more.
Yeah, no, yeah. It's not best practice. And like I said, as an external, you get away with some of that stuff. But yeah, it's not best practice. That's difficult.
I think recommending coaching to the hiring manager too, like that may sound, and that, I mean, I would love our listeners to weigh in on this if that sounds offensive, but like if you're going to work with people in a certain country that you don't live in, where that language it's not your first language, and if that's going to be an obstacle to you bringing in top tier talent because they're literally declining to move forward in the process, it's happening, it's a fact. Is that fair to say, some coaching, or is there, what can we do here? Because I think they've got to work on it.
Yeah, that's really interesting because it goes to like, the self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
So it's difficult if someone's not self-aware, but you got to think like, hey, if someone's a tyrant, if someone's being an asshole, which that happens a lot, that's its own separate thing. I've even had candidates like that you had to talk to and tell like, hey, you better like shape up or ship out. But yeah, you're right. I think it's because what makes it very, very heavy is to talk about someone's accent and communication skills.
Sure.
I think that is, it's because it feels there's nothing more personal. But when you think about it, someone's actually personality also is very personal, but yet we attack those things.
So true.
And we do say you have to get coaching, you have to do this. Yeah. So it's really interesting, actually. That's where the feelings come in. I know we always talk about, feelings are not facts, right? But there's emotion everywhere, and we're human, and you can't be human without it. So yeah, it's difficult.
I think that in summary, I was going to say, I would give a hiring manager different feedback than I would give a candidate. And that may not feel fair, but I'm just sitting here, and that's my self-awareness of like, look, I feel like no job is going to get filled if we have a one person that nobody can understand. And if there is other people we can bring into the process, because obviously you're hired to do a job, you want to bring in the best candidates and the best talent possible for that hiring manager. And if that's an obstacle that you're not going to be able to overcome, but it's so far beyond even the interview process. Like, okay, so if we figure out a solution or a workaround for the interview process, what are they going to do once they get hired? Well, how are we going to help you guys communicate effectively?
True. Yeah, true. It has longer lasting results or problems.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. So, okay. So what else have you had to deal with candidates like that? You've had to like, hey, I got to give you this feedback. How else have you done that? Give me a battle story.
With candidates, I mean, I've had to tell candidates, and I'm thinking back on some of the craziest shit. Like, I've had to tell candidates before with regards to like what you need to wear. You can't wear like a wife beater, basketball shorts to an interview or even a video interview. But with the things that they talk about, like I've even had candidates say inappropriate things. I've had candidates say things with regards to people's accent or make assumptions about where they're from, where you're like, oh my God, no, that person's not from there. That's not like, and saying it to them. Another horror story that I've had that is like just a horror story in life. You're a woman, you'll get this. But what are you do? And the person's not pregnant.
Oh, God.
And asking the hiring manager that. And so it's like, but they're trying to be nice, right? And you have to really look at the intent. And the hiring manager was so pissed off about it. And I was like, I understand that, but I also don't, because having been pregnant before and stuff, and also, I don't know, I just wouldn't get offended by that if someone said that to me, because they're trying to wish you well. I could see absolutely where it is offensive, but I also am like, okay, somebody look at what their intent was. Their intent was to try to say something nice. And so, yes, it may have completely failed because you're not pregnant at all. And it was like insert foot in mouth. But I mean, the intent. And so that's where I had to talk to that hiring manager about like, look, I understand how that would be offensive. And then you let the candidate know, okay, you can't say things like, you don't make assumptions about people being pregnant. Don't make assumptions about religion. Don't do any of that stuff. But I've had a lot of horror stories with regards to things that people say, and you just have to coach the candidates to say, but it's always like, I didn't know what I didn't know, like they weren't trying to say something to offend them, it was just like, it ended up happening. The language one, I've dealt with more, the language one specifically that I've dealt with was more, and I feel like I can say this because I'm specifically born in East Texas, but East Texas, like sometimes the Texan language it's just so thick that it sounds like they're almost like chewing on the inside of their mouth when they're talking. And so I've actually had to give that feedback. Like we've got to articulate a little bit. They're just really struggling to understand you. I'm a Texan. Look, I get it. Sometimes our accents can be difficult to understand, but slow down and you've got to actually like enunciate your words. Mm-hmm. So I've given feedback like that before because and the person wasn't offended at all. You know, they wanted the job. They're like, okay, sure, totally understand. And then when they met in person, it was a great and even better experience, you know, but over the phone, it can happen. Things get muffled. I don't know. You know, I operate under transparent, like be as transparent as possible, obviously without offending people. But I think you got to do what's in the best interest of the candidate. And if nobody can understand them, they're not going to get a job offer that way. If nobody can understand the hiring manager, no candidate is going to want to work with you.
So I had something I want to know how you would handle this. Okay. I had already given the offer out.
Okay.
The candidate was a total asswipe. Okay. There's no better way to say that. He was such a jerk. And he wasn't just a jerk to me. He was starting to be a jerk to also the internal recruiters as well. Not to the hiring managers, but, you know, for whatever reason, they think that it's okay to be assholes to recruiters. So the recruiter said, look, I'm just going to tell you because I don't know how else to do this, but your candidate has been such a jerk to me that I think I need to now rescind his offer and let the hiring manager know, like, if they're being a jerk to me, like, I just don't want them in this organization.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, hold up, let me see what I can do. What would you have done? What would you have told the candidate?
Okay, so a couple questions. Were they a jerk the entire time before we got to the point of offer?
Off and on. It was like one day they'd wake up and they were a jerk. The next day they were fine.
Okay, because like my first question to that would be if the internal recruiters and external recruiters both had the same experience, this person was an asshole, did we not know they were an asshole before we got to the point of even offering them?
Well, so this was quite a few years ago, and I think that then we just were used to people treating us like shit a lot of times, like recruiters. It was just like, we were like, just not that important. I think now, finally, we're becoming more and more respected and important, but I think it was just one of those times where it was like, yeah, you know what? I can't have my relationship with the candidate interfere with them getting a job and being really great, you know, for this company, because my feelings shouldn't matter. I put my feelings aside lots of time, which is crazy.
Yeah, but if it's multiple people too, if it's not like an isolated incident, like we have one of those that we can attest to, and with the Millionaire recruiter program, that somebody that was just nasty from interaction one, and then it just So I think that there's a theme there. So I think if every single one of you had bad experiences with that individual, then like that's when the red flags look like six flags. Like that's the person that they are. But then my second question for you is, like, you said that they're an asshole, but what ways were they an asshole? Like, what were they doing?
We caught them in several lies. And I know that people lie about their salary, but we caught them in lies that they had offers with companies. Again, a negotiating tactic, but it goes to their character. They would, one time he hung up on somebody. The other time when you called, he was just really, really rude. And it's like, didn't we already get this? Didn't we already talk about this? Like, what's the problem? Like, I just want to deal with the company, you know? So like, we definitely knew there was some times that it was like, okay, let me just talk to the hiring manager. And everybody loved this guy, by the way. It was just us recruiters that knew better because he was an asshole to us. So what are you going to tell the candidate? Because obviously you still want to make the deal, right? So how are you going to get them by? Or you have that time where you pull it, where you're like, you know what? Not worth it pulling.
I think for me, what I would do is I would suss out, like, do I have to have any interactions with this person? Like, based on the role that they're being hired into, am I going to have to work with them? Or the recruiter's is anybody going to have to work with them? Are they going to end up being a hiring manager? Like, I would ask myself, like, how this impacts, if I'm the recruiter, how this impacts me and the team. Because if this person is completely different with the hiring team and they're showing a completely different side, okay, well, that also gives you a lot of indication about how they feel towards people that they feel are inferior to them, which I've seen that happen a lot in recruiting. Like, oh, okay, you guys are just recruiters. They may be, some of them may not even be like hiring for management or senior level roles. They're just like, you're a recruiter, so I'm automatically better than you. It's definitely a good indication of how they'll feel, how they will treat people they feel are inferior to them, regardless if it's a recruiter or not. So if they end up managing a team, I would think about all those things. Like, are they going to manage a team, and are they going to be a hiring manager, and are they going to have people working for them that are going to just be degraded and belittled? Are we going to have to work with them again? Like, I would ask myself all those questions. But if they're going to be hypothetically, if they're an engineer going to work for an engineering manager by themselves, like not on a team with anybody else, then I think that could be a different scenario. But I think if they have to interact with people, I think that you got to share that feedback. And I think probably regardless, I would tell the hiring manager anyway, like, hey, I just want to put this on your radar that we've had some of these, here's been some of the things that have transpired. Like, I think giving them the information, I wouldn't say he's been an asshole. I wouldn't say that. I would give the instance of, well, he hung up on somebody here. And I would just make sure that they understand fully who they're hiring. Because I also feel like as recruiters, it's your job to give all the information that you can on a candidate, because everybody's making a decision off of brief interactions with this person. So if you've got one that set the scene or set the tone of like, okay, this is who this person is, I think it's your job to paint that full picture. I think as far as recommending if they moved forward or not in the process, that's where I go back to like how that would affect me. Are they going to be managing people? Are they going to be working like in a basement alone? You know?
Yeah. So now let's say you've already decided like they want to take the risk. They understand his personality. So now you need to make sure that he understands his feedback and moves forward. So how are you going to tell the candidate that he's a dick?
Oh my God, I get like excited about that conversation. I would get excited to have that. If this person's been a dick and been hanging up on you and been hanging up on and been an asshole, and you get the go ahead, like, okay, we want to bring them on as long as you address it the way they've been behaving or treating people with them beforehand. That would actually excite me to talk to somebody about that. This is not isolated feedback. It's not your feedback. They've met with different people. And I feel like there's also strength in numbers with feedback with regards to people like that you're describing. I'm like, they need to hear from multiple people. And one of those people has to be somebody that they respect. So probably the hiring manager. So I would try that first. I would try to give them the feedback. If I felt like that didn't really land or that didn't really work or they weren't really receptive of it, I would go have that conversation with the hiring manager, because I'm assuming at this point the person's lived in, the hiring manager knows and is like, yeah, we'll bring them on board, just address how they behaved and let us know how it goes, and we still will move forward with them. I would make sure I gave the hiring manager all the information, and then they could determine how they would want to move forward. But then at that point, I would also recommend that they had a conversation with them about the way that they were acting. I think the hiring manager needs to address that at that point, because I think it's fair to say to the hiring manager too, like, if this person becomes a hiring manager and we have to work with them in the way they've treated the team, or how are they going to treat their own team members if they end up having people report to them? I think it's the hiring manager also needs to address it with them at that point if you do it and it's not landing and they're not like, oh my God, I'm so sorry or whatever.
Yeah. So here's what happened. Okay. So so the hiring manager did not know at all. The recruiter did not want to loop them in. Not my decision. She was internal. External. So some of those things, right? So I said, okay, fine. Let me call him. So I talked to him and I said, hey, I just want to let you know that you're being very disrespectful to a couple of the team members, and we're considering on no longer taking away your offer and no longer, joining next company. And he was like insanely apologetic, like insanely. I said, you need to make this right. And I was like, by the way, you will, because they were going to be a hiring manager eventually. He was really senior and he was going to go that path. I said, and by the way, this person will be your internal recruiter. So it's really important that you guys have a good relationship, because this isn't going very well. It's not going to be a good place for either of you to work. And so very apologetic, get off the phone. And I have a few friends in recruiting, right, that I didn't work with, and gets a call and be like, I have a battle story to tell you. And so anyways, was talking about this guy. So we caught him in another lie. And so I ended up calling the company. I said, I had a great conversation, but I think you should still pull the offer. I think you're going to get in a lot of trouble if you don't wave some flags right now. And so we ended up going against, we pulled his offer. He called and called and called, apologized. The guy wouldn't leave us alone for like 3 weeks. And had his little tail in between, and I felt great about it ever since.
That's his karma.
So, yep. So we did give feedback. We did still try to move forward, and then we ended up pulling it. But yeah, to go back to what you would have done, it's like we should have done that, before. So yeah. But at the end of the day, it's like, as a recruiter, you're trying to have your candidate pass. That's like the whole point. They want this job. The hiring manager wants these people. So it really is up to us to like make things rosy on both sides, because there's lots of times where like candidates also hate this person, that hiring manager. Like there's so many things behind the scenes. I like to look at it as we're like what's it called? A wedding coordinator. We're like a wedding coordinator.
Yeah.
We're doing all these things behind the scenes. We're making sure everything's great. We're making sure this aunt's not talking to that aunt, but that's what a recruiter does. And I don't think like a lot of people understand that, so it's like, we have to say, hey, so-and-so, I know you're long-winded. No, we're not going to say that. We're going to be like, hey, you know what? If you could, this hiring manager really likes you to get straight to the point, and people that don't, doesn't really do well during an interview, like
I just think it's a rule of thumb. Like I'm just listening to us talk. We're like hiring managers. We have examples of those where they've been assholes. Candidates been assholes. And maybe that's our broke to boss tip. It's just treat others how you want to be treated. Would you want a manager that's an absolute asshole? Like if you're a manager and you're acting like this, would you want a manager that's an absolute asshole? Like, or somebody that is just awful to work with? Candidates, candidates, I guess, like from a recruiter standpoint, we are the gatekeepers. And so, yes, we want to get you hired. As externals, we get paid if we do. As internals, obviously, there's a salary, but you get bonuses. Stuff, you have to get a certain number of hires. There's still performance metrics internally as well. And so ultimately, everybody wants the candidate and benefits from the candidate moving forward. So it takes a lot for a recruiter to pull somebody out and rescind the offer, internal or external. It takes a lot. And so I think it's just treat others how you want to be treated. It's really, really not that hard, And if he was so apologetic, it's like, I don't know. I think it's bullshit is what it is. Because if other people had those same experiences with him in your recruiter world, that's just who that person is. And he's not going to change because of this job offer. What he probably would have done is accepted it and then made that internal recruiter's life absolute living fucking hell.
Yeah. Actually, I want to look this person up at this moment and be like, where did this person go?
Yeah. I just think it's crazy. It's crazy. But I think what boils down to with the constructive criticism, you have to give the constructive criticism to the hiring managers. You have to give it to the candidates. That is part of your job as a recruiter. You owe it to everybody involved to do that. And even if it sucks sometimes having to pull a candidate out, absolutely. But I guarantee you that company probably respected your recruiter or you or whoever it was doing it a lot more for, even though it would have been a transaction you would have made money off of. Hey, this guy, this isn't going to be a good fit for you guys. I think he'll just cause a lot of problems for you in the long run. Because at that point, it's not just on you. Like, he's passed series of interviews with their person.
Which is crazy, yeah.
But so then it's not on you anymore.
Yeah, I also think, and again, I only have my engineering lens, so it's like difficult. Yeah. So I'd love your thoughts here. But like, because there's like such a drought in engineering, in software, and it's like these particular roles just really move the needle for companies. They're giving equity, they like, here's the red carpet, like all those things. It's like they're the celebrities sometimes of these companies. And it's like they just make exception after exception because, to your point earlier, is like a lot of these roles, you're just like, you're like a code monkey. Your head's down and you're like, yeah, I hate that term, God, but companies just use it all the time. But that's like, they're not really having interaction with people. So a lot of time it doesn't matter. It's just they're just coding out this one project that's going to make them hundreds of millions of dollars a company. So yeah, they make exceptions all the time.
Well, and I think too, it was all about like how you recover from it. So I think in this case, if you didn't have that additional feedback that you did from other recruiters that this guy is just a nightmare, like if it was truly an isolated incident, but he's going through some shit, it's been a hard month. So everybody that he's talked to this last month has left with fucking road rash all over him because he's just, then I think it could be a different story. Like if he had said, and you'd never heard that additional feedback from your recruiters, and he was just like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, and sends calls and sends an email apologizing to the recruiter, apologizing to you, every single person that he impacted, apologizing, doesn't have to be told to do it. I think it's all about the way you handle it too. Like you guys probably would have moved forward with him if you didn't have that additional feedback. Like, no, he treats everyone like this. This is who it is.
Yeah, that's just Smitty senses. So yeah. First of all, for our listeners, sorry, our battle stories turned into more battle stories, but but Taylor's tip at the end was really like, look, we have to take the feedback. We have to give it to them, because if you don't, they're going to keep failing interview after interview and interview. It's not just that isolated, client that, of course we want to, like we said, regardless if you're internal or external, you have metrics and you have money you have to make, right? But it's like, this affects their whole livelihood. And I hope that as a recruiter, you understand that and you see that, and which is exactly why I really believe in feedback, even after someone's failed an interview. I think it's really important. Like that's, again, its own separate beast, but it's like, it's so important for everybody in this situation.
And I think we've talked about it before, people avoid giving feedback because they avoid conflict and they view every conversation as confrontation. But I think recruiters need to have the mindset and the perspective. It is your job to give feedback, the good, the bad, the ugly. That is part of our job as recruiters.
Yeah. And there's nice ways to spin things. Okay?
Absolutely.
Still have it with a lollipop.
Yes. You can absolutely get your point across without having to be nasty about it. I 1,000% agree. And now how that person receives it, that'll just all depend on their emotional maturity, which is not something that you can dictate or determine. But I think how they recover from it, I think that's the real tell of their character.
Yeah. Emotional maturity. Let's drop the mic on that because that's you don't hear that very often, that phrase. I love that.
Emotional maturity. Everybody needs to Google that. And and also like,
how can we talk about this more?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to write it down and we'll think of a subject like that goes with that. There's we have a million stories that we could tell about it, but emotional maturity is really, really important.
Yeah. It's like, how do you get there? Because I talk a lot about emotional intelligence and that's its own separate ballgame. But I mean, it obviously relates a lot. But yeah, how do you get emotional maturity?
Boom.
Love it.
Episode.
Watch. Yeah. Episode.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for listening. Again, you can see this on the Millionaire Recruiter YouTube. All of our, eye rolls, our hand movement, dancing.
These are long for Lincoln. This is for Lincoln. Can't even see your arms. Can't even fit in the screen. Inside joke. But thank you guys so much for listening. As always, we appreciate your feedback, reviews, comments. If there's something you'd like us to discuss, if you have another question, just like that, the last episode we did where somebody wrote us with a question and we talked about it, please do that. We love that, actually.
It excites us. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, y'all.